All right, here we go. So this is our first assignment, the pixel portraits. These are going to be due Thursday, September 10th, so that gives you just over a week and a half. It'll be due at the beginning of class, so you'll come in, you'll turn in your work at the beginning of class, and then we'll move on to starting the tutorial for the next project. It's going to be a pretty simple project and won't really rely too heavily on your drawing pads, your drawing tablets, like I mentioned the other day. If you have them, I would definitely get used to using them and use them on this assignment. But this assignment isn't going to be sort of physical drawing as much as it is digital drawing. You'll understand what I mean when I show you the actual imagery. Okay, so part one. Using the bustgrid.psd file that I've provided, you're going to draw a 50 by 50 pixel full color self-portrait. From that original portrait, you will then draw two additional ones as different Photoshop layers in the same PSD file. I'll explain what all this means once we get into the software. Essentially creating three frames that will be turned into an animated GIF. So your bust grid is going to be a small animation, a three-frame animation. Each of the three frames will be a different snapshot of you performing an action. Winking, sticking out your tongue, all these other ones, whatever you'd like, doesn't matter to me. Depending on your chosen action, it may require more than three portraits, more than three frames, but three is the minimum required amount. Get rid of this extra. So at least three, more if you'd like, up to you. The majority of the work for this assignment will be on the first portrait, and subsequent portraits will essentially be modified versions of the first. So for instance, if you do a animated GIF of yourself winking, you'll draw a portrait of your face with your eye open. The next frame will be a portrait of your face with your eye partially closed, but most of the image you will not actually have to rework unless you specifically want to. Say you want to tilt the head or something, along that lines. But like I said, the majority of the work will be on the first one. The second and third frames will be kind of modified versions of the first. So you want to put a lot of work into that first frame to get it looking really, really good, and then just slightly modify the other two accordingly. All right, part two. This is the other. We're going to have basically two parts. Two images for the project. Part two is the full body grid.psd file that I am providing. It is a full body, full color self-portrait. It's essentially, I think, twice as tall, so it'll be 100 pixels by 50. I may be a little bit off there, but it's essentially that. And fill in the background is necessary. This full body self-portrait is completely separate from the bust GIF, and it will not animate, so you will not need to create more than one frame for it. You're just going to be drawing a full body color self-portrait in pixel imagery. And then part three, like I've already mentioned, is going to be taking your bust grid, bust portrait frames, and then creating an animated GIF in Photoshop. I'm not going to be showing you that in this video this week. I'm going to let you guys just focus on drawing, and then we'll focus on the animation in the next class. Pretty simple stuff. Okay, the deliverables. This is the things that you're going to turn into me on the due date. You're going to turn in a folder with your name as the title of the folder, and then two files inside. A yourname.jpg, so whatever your name is, .jpg, and that's going to be your full body pixel portrait. It's going to be saved as a JPG, which is a JPEG. I'll talk about that when I get into Photoshop. And the animated pixel portrait, which is going to be your name as well, .gif or GIF. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at a couple of examples. These are student examples. So this is an animated GIF. This is, of course, more than three frames, right? This is, I don't know, let's see, probably about 10 to 12 frames, something like that. And you can see that basically it builds off of that first frame, and then it just adds a little bit to it every single frame. So there, of course, is a significant amount of work done, but the majority of the work is based on that first frame. This one is more like 3 or 4 frames, but still has a nice animation. The rain in the background is very subtle and simple, but works pretty well. The colors are really nice. One thing that you're going to have to to learn here is how to utilize very minimal color to describe highlight, midtone, and shadows. And the most successful use of that is really what will determine the success of the project overall. This is the full body portrait, so you can see that it's essentially the GIFs are basically square. They're 50 by 50. The full bodies are essentially 2 squares, so 50 by 100 pixels. I'll talk about pixels once we get into Photoshop for those of you who are unfamiliar. So consider, you'll notice that some of the more effective of these are definitely the ones that have specific light sources, right? So there's obvious light coming from the top left here. It even shows in the background with the light source being the light over here and sort of darker shade over here. Light hitting the face, light hitting the nose, light hitting the hair. And then there's these subtle changes in difference between where the highlights are, midtones, and then shadows. And that kind of serves to sculpt the actual drawing itself. Since we're working with just these little square pixels, you don't have a whole lot of ability to really describe a lot of depth to your drawing. So you have to learn how to do that with a minimal amount of pixels. This is a really cool use of it's a lot of frames for sure, but notice at the beginning of this is like a Dragon Ball Z kind of Super Saiyan thing, right? So all the yellow stuff that kind of forms around him. Look at the face and the reflected light. So that's like, I feel like the most interesting and well done part of this is that all that yellow stuff that comes around and reflects light onto his face, and you can see it really illuminate the face as it kind of comes up over the head. So that's what I'm talking about using light to define your images. Here's another really good one of, I think this was kind of a manipulation of a photo that he already had of himself, and he kind of just worked from looking at the photo and then redrawing it in Photoshop. So that's definitely something you can do. This is a little larger than the 100 by 50, I believe. So body positioning, slight movement to the idea of like full frontalness, right? So having the ones that are more successful generally have a more interesting pose. The feet aren't, for instance, it's not 2 of the same legs, right? So this foot is turned out. Her head is slightly tilted to, or not tilted, but turned to this direction. Her arms are doing 2 different things, right? So that's just the idea of taking the figure itself and giving it sort of points of interest all over the place that aren't easily predictable and symmetrical or always the same. All right, so those are some good examples, and let's get into Photoshop, and I'll show you guys the basics.